Hey everyone, and welcome to this tutorial. This is the first part where we're going to actually dive into Substance Designer, where we're going to focus on texture creation. The key is to create those very nice stylized textures. Let me isolate it. Okay, and that one. So both of those we'll be focusing on to get a very nice look, curves, and all the shapes in Substance. Then we're going to bring them into the Unreal Engine, create a material for it, and a couple Niagara emitters. Then we're gonna need some fake projectiles like that one. We're gonna have some sparks as well. And we're gonna add a glow with some random rotation. We're gonna also dive into optimization. We're gonna see how we can maybe cut overdraw a little bit so it's not over the top. But in this part, let's focus on Substance Designer. I'm gonna grab the texture so we can have a look. I've got two. We might combine them later on actually into one texture and drive the color in Niagara rather than reading it from the texture. Okay, so let's dive into Substance and let's create this Muzzle flash generator. Okay, so I'm going to start with the shape, and I'm going to use that shape as a mask for my tile sampler. I'm going to pick this soft circle, scale it down to maybe 0.6, and next I'm going to get tile sampler. I'm going to go maybe with 7 by 5. I'm going to pick a disk, scroll down where it's position random, put some random value there. I'm gonna now plug in my mask to mask map input, maximize the threshold, and I'm gonna invert that map. As you can see, those circles appear only or rather outside my mask, which is exactly what I want. I can go back to scale now here and scale it up. You can play with the random, but at this point I'm not gonna do that because I think it gives me better results if I just stick to them being the same size. I can just play with the position random until I get a shape somewhere in the middle that is fairly symmetrical. Maybe something like this. You can go back to your shape and manipulate that by playing with that scale. I'm gonna go back here, play with the amount as well. I think it gives me a bit more stylized shape if I'm gonna keep the Y amount lower. As you can see, going 11 by 6. I'm gonna end up with this. Next, I'm just gonna use a invert grayscale. Next, gonna use a transform. I think the bottom is a bit more squished than the top. So what we could do, we could get a trapezoid next and scale the top maybe to 0.9. Disable tiling here. And now if you go to this transform, you can flip it 180 and decide which one you prefer. I think I prefer that one, so I'm just gonna go with this shape, and I'm gonna rotate it back to its normal position, which is pointing left. Alright, so I think that's going to be our main shape. I'm just gonna scale it down on that transform node just so I can see both ends, and I'm gonna use this. I'm gonna plug this to splatter circular. It plugs into the background. That's not what I want. I'm going to hold Alt on my keyboard, and with a mouse click I'm going to detach this and plug it back into the pattern input 1. I'm going to select the image input. For the pattern amount, I think I'm going to go with maybe 6. I'm going to do symmetry random, but only horizontal. For the spread, I'm going to lower it. I'm going to use global offset as well. For the size, I think I'm just going to put maybe 1 and 1 here, and I'm going to scale it down. I would like this those shapes to be a bit more pointy, so I'm just going to find out which axis I have to tweak, and it seems like Y, so I'm just going to put this at maybe 1.5. And now I can play with that size random as well and get something like this. I'm going to go back to my global offset, move it there, try to blend that back in using a max settings. So from here, there are a couple of things you could do. You could, for example, go to your radius and try to play with the position of it. I like this to be around here maybe, but a bit more pointy. So I'm just going to increase that scale slightly at the same time as tweaking this radius as well. Somewhere here, I believe. And scale it back slightly. You can play with the spread. I think this is actually reaching a bit too much. That feels a bit better in my opinion. And also that shape seems to be quite large, the main shape. So what you could do, grab transformation, hold Control and just scale it down slightly. And it's gonna make it a bit more pointy. Okay, so that's going to be our main shape, I believe. Obviously, there's still things we can tweak. We can increase the spread here. Then move the radius. And once we're here, I'm just trying to see if we can figure this out, how we can disable tiling on it and if it's going to work. So in here, I'm just going to go to tiling. I don't think it's going to work, but worth trying. Actually, it does. Perfect. So that's what we have in. I can increase the global scale now maybe and get those kind of shapes. I don't like that spread. It's just too much in my opinion. So I'm going to go with something like this. I'm going to increase that those shapes on the Y. Random maybe 0.5 on the Y axis. I think 0.5 as well on the X axis. I'm not worrying about shapes back here because we're going to be erasing that using some mask later on. But the point is that we got our main shape, I believe, and from here we're just going to use this as a generator, I guess. There are a couple of things what you could do. So for example, you can grab a transform here in case you have to offset this, and this could be our first variation. So I'm just going to grab this. I'm going to use frame and I'm going to call this variation 1. I'm going to place it here for us to use in the future because we might just duplicate this if we want a bit more shapes here and there or just slightly different ones. But again, we're just going to use this for later. Okay. Next are the couple things that we have to create, which are sets of blurs and just add a bit more motion to that texture. And we're going to need some space. I'm just going to get a transform tool or node, scale it down slightly and offset it until it touches the edge here. And with this, first thing, let's maybe get a slope blur. And also I'm going to get a gradient. For the gradient, I'm gonna try 90 rotation, plug it here to the slope, ramp up the samples. I'm gonna put maybe 16, but I think it might be too much. So I'm just gonna click Control Z, get the default settings, which seems like they are 10. And next I'm gonna add a directional blur, and as well just gonna go with the default settings, which is 10. I'm gonna get a transform node in case I have to offset it for some reason later on, but for now I'm just gonna keep it as it is. And I'm gonna get back to my main shape, get a blur with the default settings, transform. In case I have to offset, I'm gonna try to blend that back into what we have. I'm gonna use a max settings for the blending mode. So with this, I'm gonna play with the opacity. As you can see, it seems like my glow is just appears at the back. So I'm just gonna put the opacity set to 1. I'm gonna click once on that transform tool and pull it a little bit towards the center and scale it up slightly. So we get this halo around my texture. But I don't think I need that much. So I'm gonna put maybe 0.5 on the opacity just to get a slight glow on it. And with this, maybe it's time to get rid of that back shape here. So I'm just gonna use a blend here. I'm gonna use gradient again, and this is going to be my mask. I'm gonna put this to 90 rotation. I'm gonna get tile sampler, and that'll be my mask. From here, I'm gonna use disk for the amount. Let's go maybe 6 by 6. I'm gonna randomize the position. I'm gonna use this mask map threshold here, scale this up. I think I'm gonna play with that mask position. Maybe somewhere around here. I need to get rid of that. So we could probably just get another gradient. I'm gonna run this through histogram scan and set this gradient to 70, and that could be my mask that's actually gonna be used to erase those circles. From here, I'm gonna use blend, gonna use subtract, plug this to the top, and as you can see they disappear. If you need a bit more, you can just go to histogram scan and play with that position. Okay, I'm gonna go around here and reduce the contrast. So I'm erasing this with a gradient rather than straight line. And with that, maybe I could use a directional blur. I'm gonna try to disable the tiling on it. Seems like it worked. And with that, maybe I could just plug it to our blend here and use subtract. As you can see, we are getting rid of the ends here. I'm gonna play with that histogram scan because I would like a bit maybe harsher erosion on it. I'm gonna offset that slightly as well, so I get that kind of effect. It seems like we are getting straight line. So I'm just gonna go back to my tile sampler, ramp up the amount of those maybe. Play with that position random. Maybe reduce that blur in case I would like to get a slightly better shape here at the back. Okay, seems like we could do it as a gradient, I guess, because I can't see those circles unless I can manipulate those values. But I do want a slight blur there, so it's up to you. You can use just a gradient. I'm gonna go with the setup I've got here. And next we could start working on our glows. So I'm just gonna grab my shape I've got here. I think I'm gonna actually change that spread. I think it just reaches a bit too much here and at the bottom. So I'm just gonna go back to my circular splatter. I'm gonna go where my spread is and try to lower it to maybe something like this. All right, so once this is done, I could grab a blend here, and I would like to add some glow to it. So I'm gonna get a shape, and I find that you have to actually design a couple of those to see which one works for you best. I'm just gonna use this. I'm gonna scale it up to maybe a value of 2. I'm gonna use transform, use control. I'm gonna squish this a bit, get rid of the tiling. And once I have this, I'm gonna go back here and try to get that scale back so I barely see the edges. And once I have this, I'm gonna use a transform tool, a blur as well, to get a bit more softer look. And I'm gonna try to blend that back into my texture. I'm gonna use it as a mask. Sorry, max blending mode. I can now use this transform tool to place it whenever I think it's best, around here I believe, so it's the middle of my texture, or maybe slightly offset it towards the right, so I get this nice halo or glow around it. And once this is done, I'm gonna get additional movement to my texture by getting my texture using transform and also using a directional blur. I'm gonna go for 20. Next, I'm gonna try to blend that back in using the max method, but maybe with just 0.5. I'm gonna grab my transform, offset it slightly. You can see we're getting this very nice glow. I'm gonna scale it up and squish it on one of the axes as well. Once we have this, I'm just gonna press space to see if we're getting any texture cuts. We might have here a harsh line, but I'm just gonna leave it for now. And once I have this, I'm just gonna experiment with the trapezoid again. I'm gonna use a transformation tool, rotate it 90 degrees, use trapezoid so I can squish it, and then another transform so I could put it back in its place. I'm gonna try to scale the bottom first, see if I could get a really cool results. I think the bottom actually gives me really nice results as it comes out from the gun. With top stretch, I'm actually gonna put minus 0.5 maybe to stretch it outwards. Okay, I'm gonna press space to see if I get any cuts. No, it seems fine, so I'm just gonna leave it as it is. And with that, I'm just gonna try to plug it into the gradient map. I'm gonna put a pin here, double click, get a orange color, and then here another pin, and I'm gonna just change that color towards the red. I'm gonna play with those sliders now, trying to get a bit more yellow color there as well. It's very intense, so let's see if we can change a couple of things. I really like the those effects. So for example, that's using the directional blur. I want to see if I can reverse the order, and I can play with that opacity. I don't think it's going to give me much, so I'm just going to plug it back in as it was, as I thought it gives me slightly better results. If I play with the opacity, I think we can go with 0.4. So we're still going to keep this intense look in the middle, but we're getting this much better gradient, I believe, for for that texture. We might want to put this back into our texture, the glow. So I'm just going to have a final blend here. I'm just going to plug it this there using the max method or blending mode. Plug it here. And also a transform. So I can offset it manually. I'm going to double click on the color here and just try to get that glow. A bit towards the front of that texture. Scale it up slightly as well. I think it could work. I think I'm going to go with 0.7 on that opacity. Okay, so once we have this, I think it's a bit too intense in this area. So what we could do, before we actually apply that glow, we could have another blend. I'm gonna get a simple gradient. I'm gonna rotate that gradient, maybe 270. Plug it back in here so we can get our glow back. For the modes, I think I'm just gonna set up this as a subtract maybe. Double click on the gradient. Now I can go back to my blend and manipulate how much actually I wanna get rid of that texture. So we're having whites of very intense colors here, but here we're losing some of the intensity. So it might be good in case you want to have a better control. You can implement the histogram scan here. Change this position, apply the contrast as well. And as you can see, you can get a very intense values here, but now soft gradients around this area. And finally, I'm just going to apply a glow to it. I'm going to increase the glow size, but I think everything else I'm just going to keep it as the default value. I think that's my muzzle flash. And now might be good time to actually go back and see if we can manipulate some of the values that we've designed so we could get a slightly better shapes. I'm gonna go back maybe to my directional blur here, tweak it to see what it does. Gonna change that maybe to value of 4 because I like to have those pointy shapes. I've got the transform, but I already forgot what it does. I'm just gonna see if I can offset some of it to get a slightly better gradients, like for example here. Not a massive change, but it gives me really nice values for that gradient. I'm gonna go back to my slope here and play with that opacity, or rather intensity. Directional blur. I think I want to actually reduce that. So it was 10. I think I'm gonna drop it down to 5. So I get a slightly better cuts or values for that. And with this, I'm gonna go to my splatter circular I've got here. I'm gonna try to play with those. I think 6 gives me good results. There are other settings, you can just play with it. Radius. If you want a slightly different weapon, for example, or muzzle flash for that weapon, you can play with that radius. We got spread. I'm gonna go maybe 0.25, so it reaches a bit more outwards. You can try to play with that random scale now to see if we're gonna get some better results with it. Scale as well. Scale random if you want to apply some global changes, but I think I'm not going to attach that. And overall, I think it started looking okay. There are a couple issues I have, mainly around the blur. I think we're getting just too much blur in some areas. So let me find those. It might be here. I'm gonna drop it. No, actually, I think we want to get that because this is erosion for our intensity. Let me find the other blurs we have. Might be here. I'm gonna drop it to 0. Nope, we do want to have that halo around it. There's another one here. I'm gonna drop it. Actually looks better with it, in my opinion. Here is another one. I think it's 0.5. I'm gonna drop it to 0.2. Here is another one. I think I'm just gonna go maybe with 1 intensity for that directional blur. Okay, once we have this, I'm gonna go to the tile sampler to see how it behaves if I'm gonna start modifying its settings. As you can see, if you modify the amount, it might give you some really cool results. I think I'm gonna go with 8 and 6. I quite like the shapes I'm getting from those settings. You can play with size random. And finally, I'm just gonna copy that setting just in case, because this is very delicate setting. But again, it seems like I'm getting some really cool results with it. Depends what you're trying to achieve. Right, I'm gonna paste what I had. This one. And I think this is going to be our main shape of the muzzle flash. And next, let's try to design the erosion map for it, so it disappears from the scene very nicely in that stylized way. And I want to use this node because this is going to be our final node. Obviously, if we're gonna make some adjustments here, so if you go to this trap site, for example, you probably want to modify this one a few times, because you can see if you're gonna scale this down, maybe here, and play with that top stretch, you might get a slightly different results for your muzzle flash. Okay, so let me select that trap site again. I'm gonna try to get something that I think it looks cool, like this. I'm gonna grab that final node, and I'm just gonna use a blend mode here. I'm gonna drop opacity to 0 just to demonstrate what it does. So if I'm gonna run this through threshold now, just to see how it disappears, because basically this is our smooth step in Unreal Engine. Okay, don't worry, we're gonna cover this in the next lesson, but here I just want this to disappear much nicer than what you see on the screen right now. This doesn't look stylized at all. It actually looks broken. Okay, so a couple things. We got that blend now. We need to make it disappear much nicer. And how I would like this to erode or disappear from the screen would be probably from right to the left. So let's design a mask for it. I'm gonna get a gradient. I'm gonna rotate it 90 degrees. I'm gonna use a tile sampler. From here, I'm gonna use probably 4x4. I'm gonna pick disks. Random position, I'm gonna plug in my gradient as a mask. I'm gonna go to my mask map threshold now. Scale up those circles or disks. And I think from here, I'm gonna keep using my mask map threshold so I can actually erode some of those. Okay, maybe something like this. Next, I'm going to delete the left side here. So that will be a blend. I'm gonna copy that gradient here, run it through histogram scan, plug it to the top, it's going to be subtract. And with the histogram scan, I can now just play with that position, but I think I need to rotate my gradient to be 270. And now it seems like it's working. Just gonna ramp up my contrast. I think those circles might be a little too big and also not many of them. So I'm just gonna go maybe with 6 by 9. Scale them down slightly. Try different random positions so it actually covers the whole bit here. With that, I'm gonna run it through directional blur. I'm gonna apply maybe 20 and I'm gonna disable tiling on it. And once I have this, I'm gonna use it with my blend. I think I need a lot more gradient here. So I'm just gonna try to get, I'm gonna try 50. Gonna try with that 50 value, put it into the blend, select subtract here, ramp up the opacity, maybe to 0.5. I'm gonna try my threshold now. So I think we're almost there. The only issue I have is that once I reach here, because up to here is pretty cool, like it disappears on its own and it goes in direction I want it to go. However, here we're just cutting the front of it. So there are a couple of things we can do. I'm gonna increase that blur actually to 100. Get that threshold now. And I think it disappears now exactly as I want. From here, you can probably try to tweak a couple values. For example, I'm going to increase my X amount and Y amount as well. So I got a lot more detail in that map. If I go to threshold now, you can see I'm eroding it slightly differently. Although I'm still cutting the front of it around there. So I'm gonna go back to my blur, maybe increase it further, 130. And now I think it disappears very nicely. A lot better than what it used to, in my opinion. Okay, so this is going to be, I believe, our erosion map or our alpha. I'm just going to run it through auto levels, just in case I would like to normalize the values, run it to threshold again to check if it changed much. And it seems like it's working. So that's going to be my alpha map, but I'm going to use it as a actually erosion, not alpha. Okay, so in here, what I could do is to get RGB merge. That goes to alpha. Actually, not this. RGB alpha split, I think. Nope. Alpha merge. Perfect. So that one goes to alpha. That one goes to the top. I double click. And this is what we have in. I'm just going to double check how the alpha looks like. It seems like I've got what I want. All right. So I'm going to save this. And also, it might be a good time to create variations because I don't want to ruin what we have. So I'm just going to keep it as it is, and let's create variations. I'm just going to select my variation 1, copy and paste it here. I'm going to name this variation 2. Actually, going to delete that frame. I'm going to create a new one soon. And with this, I would like to cut in, or rather cut out some of the shapes from it. So I'm gonna have a blend here. I'm gonna have a, let's have another splatter circular. I'm just gonna copy and paste exactly the same one, but for the shape, I'm gonna use something else. I'm gonna use a disk. which I'm gonna stretch. So I'm gonna plug this here. That's how it looks. Obviously not what I want. I'm just gonna change that value of that size roughly to maybe something like this. I'm gonna use the radius, so it's actually going out like that, and I'm gonna use it as a subtract here. Gonna come here and change the opacity to 0.5. I don't want to completely erode some of the shapes, just some of them. I'm gonna go back to my splatter and maybe increase this amount to that sort of value. And now I can play with the radius, so I can sink in more into that texture. I'm gonna play with the size. I don't want too much random value on the x-axis, but once I have this, let's see if I can blend that back in and how it's gonna look like. So I'm just gonna go to my color I've got here, and I'm gonna apply that into that blend to see what it does. And as you can see, we're kind of getting some different shapes in our design here. Okay, and from here you can probably grab that splatter circular and play with some of the shapes you've got here. For example, spread. You can spread it out a bit more. Play with the radius probably, and you're gonna get slightly different shapes, mainly because we're just cutting into those using that blend. You can play with the opacity. However, I feel like just, you know, going halfway, 0.5, it gives me good results. I'm gonna go back to that splatter circular, and I'm gonna experiment with the amount. For example, I mean, really like those cuts there. You can play with the spread of those shapes as well. Sink them even more like that, so that would seem like they are breaking away from the main shape. Okay, so that will be another generator we can use to actually erode some of the parts of that. So I'm gonna select this, frame it, and that could be my variation 2. And the final variation I want to do, I actually want to move this slightly because I would like to introduce additional blend here and plug it there. It's going to be subtract, and I'm gonna put this to 0.5. And in here, I'm just gonna copy this variation, paste it here. I'm gonna name this variation 3. And in terms of shapes, I'm gonna set this maximum opacity and use the radius here to move this back in. And you essentially can have something like this. Actually gonna get rid of this and only use this splatter circular. It goes into that blend that we've just made right there. I'm gonna select my RGB merge node. I'm gonna go back to my blend I've got here, and I can manipulate those values. So for that one, I like to go maybe 0.5. I can go back to my splatter circular I've got here and play with some of the shapes or patterns here. I could probably use bigger spread, play with the size as well. And we're gonna cut into those shapes and create essentially a muzzle flash without a main body or main shape here. I think with this one might be a good idea to actually randomize some of those shapes. Like that. Even the global random, I believe. You can play with the radius if you like. I'm gonna focus on just eroding here the main body. But as you can see, once we're gonna get there, we might get some really decent looking stylized shapes into that muzzle flash. But again, we already got different variations. I just wanna use that one to count out the main body of that muzzle flash. Okay. So I think this is going to give us 3 textures in total, but this is going to be our master control if you want to erode some of it. Okay, so for example, if I'm plugging my first variation, I don't think it looks that great. Second one, that looks a lot better. We're getting a lot of cutouts as well. So that'll be my first texture I'm going to export, and I'm going to use this later in Unreal Engine. But also I'm going to lower this opacity to 0 because I would like to see the whole muzzle flash, and I'm going to export this texture as well just to double check how it looks in the engine. And finally I'm going to plug in my first variation, and that one goes as well. So I'm going to end up with 3 textures in Unreal Engine just to test, create material for it, and test how it looks in Niagara in case I need to add some modification to it. All right, so that's for the texture part. In the next video we're going to cover the material creation in Unreal Engine.